As I reflect back on my journey in investigating the sequence of events in the end times, I've made some shocking discoveries, lies and myths that we've been told is true in the end times. But my journey is far from over. I came across what might be a stumbling block on this road, and that is distinguishing the difference between when you interpret the Bible and when you insert ideas into the Bible. The difference between the two is that interpretation is the process in which you try to come to a conclusion based from the very words from the Bible itself, whereas inserting is when we add ideas into the Bible in order to come up with a certain interpretation. So the first three stages within the sequence of events in the end times are misinterpretations from certain Bible passages and thus have led to ideas being inserted into the Bible. Whereas the last three steps in the sequence of events are events directly from the book of Revelation. So how are we to interpret these and remain true to what the text is actually saying and not end up inserting our own ideas? In my own journey of wanting to discover what is true and false about end-time predictions, can the book of Revelation give me these answers? I also have to consider what Simon told me about the book of Revelation not being the only apocalyptic text at the time. But can I find any answers from the book of Revelation in regards to what is the future and fate of humanity? Let's begin by looking at the next step in the sequence, Armageddon. This transforms our mode of thinking from a green lush landscape in Europe to harsh desert grounds in the Middle East. From what we know of Armageddon is that most people believe it is going to be some sort of Middle East battle between the people of God and the people of the Antichrist. The word Armageddon only appears once in the Bible, which is Revelation chapter 16. Sometimes the translation is actually Harmageddon. This caused me to ask two questions to the scholars I had been interviewing. If I was reading this as a face value person, given what we know so far, is there such a place as Armageddon, and will there really be a battle known as the Battle of Armageddon?
Armageddon seems to be derived from Megiddo, mountain, mountain of Megiddo.
Is there such a place as Armageddon? I'm going to say absolutely yes, and I've been there. I mean, when I've been to Israel, on my study visit, we went there many years ago. We went to visit Tel Megiddo, which is the tells are these kind of flat-topped hills that used to have cities on them. They're now archaeological sites. And Tel Megiddo is the hill over the valley of Megiddo.
Megiddo is a city, obviously a famous city in the Old Testament, a strategically located city by a very narrow pass which opens up into this vast plain.
The word, like I said, the word Armageddon itself, if you look on a map in the Middle East or anywhere, there is no literal place on planet Earth that says this is the place of Armageddon. Now, there's a valley north of Jerusalem, which in the Old Testament, it was called the Valley of Megiddo. And there were a lot of battles that were fought in the Valley of Megiddo. And so when you look at the word itself, literally means the mountain of Megiddo. And the word Megiddo, many scholars translate that to mean slaughter or the place of cutting off. So you've got the mountain of slaughter.
But the location itself is at the very least atmospheric.
Within the Jewish history stories in the Old Testament, you do get a number of key battles in Israel's history being fought in and around Megiddo, on the plains of Megiddo. And so when John in Revelation is looking to kind of set his sort of mythical great final showdown between good and evil, it makes perfect sense that he would pick a site that has got these historical echoes of being places where Israel has successfully fought battles in the past.
So the memory of that, the kind of multiple memories associated with that as a place of battle, and of course it is as it's a massive plain opening out from Megiddo, a perfect battleground. If you're going to imagine the location of the greatest of battles, the ultimate battle which will defeat the forces of evil, then the plain near Megiddo is the most obvious place to locate it.
He sets this kind of great playoff between these two, where Christ wins the battle, actually not with bloodshed, but with the sword of the gospel that comes from his mouth. This is the rider on the white horse at the Battle of Armageddon. He sets that in the geographical location that deliberately and consciously evokes Israel's battles of the past, where Israel, as the people of God, had fought battles and survived.
But I would hesitate to say it's a specific place on Earth, given that John's geography often seems more than terrestrial. It's actually quite difficult to locate John's geography on a map. So, places and their associations are caught up in this apocalyptic geography that he describes.
So we know quite a lot about its past, but what about its future? Will there really be a future battle at Armageddon? But I soon discovered what a difficult question this is, because we come into the realm of interpretation here, and I want to investigate the three positions that I have already identified: the futurist view, the historic view, and the preterist view.
In the Left Behind scenario, at the end of the 7 years of tribulation, after the church is gone and God refocuses on the Jews, the Battle of Armageddon is a Middle East-centered battle where the Antichrist gathers the nations and they sweep down, especially in a little valley north of Jerusalem called the Valley of Megiddo, and that's where there's a final military battle against Jews. That's the popular view of Armageddon.
The historic view is quite similar.
Daniel 2, the basic template, starts with the kingdom of Babylon, which was 600 BC. And then it takes you down from Babylon to Persia, to Greece, to the Roman Empire at the time of Jesus, and then the breakdown of the Roman Empire beyond that, and then going down through European history all the way till the end, and Jesus comes again. So that's historicism. It didn't all happen in the first century like the preterists say. It's not all coming in the future like the futurists say. It's been going on for a long time, and it's here right now, and it's going to intensify until the final conflict. It's very clear that Armageddon is not a Middle East war. It's a global gathering of the worldwide forces of Satan against God. When you go back to Daniel 2, King Nebuchadnezzar had this dream of a big metal man. And then Daniel came in and interpreted the dream and said that that man was a symbol of the head of gold, and the different metals would represent the different nations of Babylon, Persia, Greece, and Rome. And then the 10 toes represented the division of the Roman Empire and the breakdown in Europe, all to the end of time. And then it says there would be a rock that would come down from the sky, and the rock would crush the image. And in Daniel 2, 44 and 45, it says that that rock would become a great mountain, and it would fill the whole earth. And that mountain is the kingdom of God. It says that God's kingdom will come down and crush the statue representing the kingdoms of man, and the kingdom of God will be ultimately established. So his kingdom is described as the mountain. And Satan's kingdom is also described as a mountain. In Jeremiah, I believe it's chapter 51, Babylon was called the destroying mountain. So the word mountain applies to a kingdom. So the Battle of Armageddon is basically Satan's global kingdom coming to the mountain of slaughter. And Jesus comes on the white horse in chapter 19 and crushes Satan's kingdom. And so God's mountain prevails, and Satan's mountain goes down, and it's slaughtered. That's why it's called Armageddon, the mountain of slaughter.
Now finally, the third view. What was John intending if it was something in the past?
Yes, I do think it's a real place, and I do think there have been battles there, but In terms of, does John then think there's going to be another physical battle in that place in the future? I don't think that's the way John works. I think that's kind of reading him slightly wrong. So, you said a kind of like, what was the phrase you used? Like a surface reading or a plain reading? Yeah, I don't think that's the right way to read the Book of Revelation. It's a genre of literature that you have to do a bit of work on, and a plain reading is probably going to take you into readings that are less true to what John was trying to do than actually doing a bit of decoding on it and thinking through the images he's using and why. The other thing I would say is the Battle of Armageddon isn't really a battle of victorious defeat in terms of hoo-ha, Christians win. It's much more about an image of judgment, which says that the forces of evil in the world are under judgment. And they always have been and they always will be. And they might get ever so strong and ever so powerful, but ultimately evil does not win history, is I think what's going on in that image. And I would say, when we're interpreting that for our lives, Jesus defeats evil in the world now, and always has done through the faithful witness, often unto death through suffering, of those who follow him.
So is the Battle of Armageddon just a symbolic picture of how Christ wins over evil in the world, or is it a literal physical battle in the future? Perhaps both could be true at the same time. Christopher Rowland is one of the leading voices in the study of apocalyptic literature and the doctrine of eschatology. He very kindly agreed to help me in my investigation.
The Book of Revelation is both about the first century and it's about the hope for the future, rather than the end times, which I think is a problematic term. So yes, it is about the first century, in that all those writers writing in the first century believed that the hope for the future, which was looked forward to, was already in the process of fulfillment.
Perhaps for many people, and even myself, we don't have to live in this conflicted way of seeing Revelation as a book as both addressing first century issues and giving the secrets about the future. What if we didn't have the Book of Revelation? Would we have any expectations at all? To test the claim that the Battle of Armageddon is in the future, I wanted to compare it with the timetable of the Antichrist, because both the futurist view and the historicist view both believe that Jesus Christ will return when that battle begins. This is the image of Jesus coming on the white horse, and I wanted to read the text to see what it exactly says. I saw the heaven opened, and behold a white horse, and he who sat on it is called Faithful and True. In righteousness he judges and makes war. You also have to consider that Jesus Christ has already appeared multiple times within the Book of Revelation. Why is this the actual second coming, and all the rest are just angelic visions of Christ? I've noticed also with a lot of futuristic interpreters, they seem to claim that Jesus Christ will return at this exact moment. I was noticing my reading of Revelation that Christ has already appeared on the scene both in heaven and on earth multiple times before chapter 16. So would it be appropriate to say that this isn't just the one-off moment in chapter 16?
Yeah, I think you're bang on there. So in Revelation, one of the ways in which you can think about the plot of Revelation is it's kind of like a spiral that kind of goes round and round and round, and it's actually quite repetitious. The characters shift a little bit, or at least the way the characters appear. So Jesus is present in a number of places in the Book of Revelation. He's there as the lamb, he's there as the lion, he's there as the rider on the right horse, and he's there as the son of the woman who's pursued by the beast into the wilderness. Jesus keeps cropping up in the Book of Revelation, and he looks a bit different every time he crops up, and whichever image is being used in those particular chapters is revealing another aspect of Jesus's nature and character and a bit of John's theology about who Jesus is. But I think what that means is you can't read the Book of Revelation chronologically as if it's some series of events that's going to play out in order from kind of chapter 5 to chapter 22.
This is the essential question in my investigation. Can the book of Revelation be read chronologically? It seems that most end-time scholars read it this way because this is how they have created their theories, both the Antichrist timetable and our main sequence of events that we established at the beginning. All of this is on the assumption that you read the book chronologically.
You get in Schofield Reference Bible, where different prophetic texts, stroke apocalyptic texts, are put together in a sort of map of the end of the world. I think that is foreign to what we've got in the Bible. But I mean, that is absolutely typical of how it is. That detailed biblical exegesis, which includes the whole Bible, can be put together in such a way that you kind of get an ordnance survey map of how the end of the world is going to come. And I personally, I can't find that in the Bible as it stands.
So there is no way to sort of calculate a chronological order in a way, is that right?
I believe that to be the case, certainly as far as the biblical texts are concerned. In the history of the interpretation of the book of Revelation, that kind of thing has happened a great deal. But it's based on the ingenuity of the interpreter rather than actually jumping at you out of the text.
So what is the best way to read the book of Revelation?
It's like a series of spotlights, if you like, shining in on Jesus and the church and the nature of God and the place of evil in the world. And almost every chapter, every couple of chapters, one spotlight gets turned off and another one from a different angle gets turned on. And suddenly you're seeing it differently, but you're seeing the same thing over and over again. So the basic lesson is that good will and does ultimately win over evil. And when evil appears all powerful, it's not really. And when the church feels under threat, it's actually held in God's hand faithfully and tightly. So, those messages of hope and pastoral stuff, all of that's there multiple times through the book. So Jesus doesn't kind of just appear in chapter 16, defeat the forces of evil and then leave again. He's doing that all the way through.
Something else I had to consider was other Bible passages on this matter. For example, in the book of Acts, when Jesus ascends into heaven and the angel says to the apostles, "You will see him return in the exact same way," and they just came down from the Mount of Olives. Is that a literal physical description of where Jesus will come at the second coming? The Revelation version says he'll come at Armageddon, whereas the book of Acts says he'll come on the Mount of Olives. And other New Testament passages says he is coming with the clouds. Is there any way to know for certain what the second coming of Christ will physically look like?
Do you think the Bible overall, in some of the apocalyptic books, gives details of what the second coming of Christ would look like? I know we probably can't say when it would come, but what kind of event it would be?
I don't think there's any book in the Bible which does that in the kind of detail that you get in a lot of modern commentaries, say on the book of Revelation, which links Revelation with Daniel and indeed with other prophetic texts to work out a detailed plan. Well, there is no detailed plan apart from the basic framework, which you've got both in Daniel and in Revelation, that there would be a time of tribulation on earth preceding the Messianic age. That basic pattern they adhered to, but apart from that, and one might say that there was a conviction that a certain number of tribulations and woes had to be gone through before the end could finally come. I don't think there's anything more specific than that.
I had to ask myself, is this another assumption that Christians have made, that the second coming is mentioned in the book of Revelation? Because the usual sequence of events has Christ coming at the Battle of Armageddon. In order to find out the answer to that question, I would have to look at the next step in the sequence, the millennium.